Ah, well, that's probably good for our next guest, Ben Harris-Quinney. That's a good name, Ben.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Ben's come in here. I don't know how you've got a flipping nerve to come in here with the flu, Ben. I really don't.
Well, we're resorting to biological warfare now.
Yeah, well, obviously
Brexit
you
remains
are.
away.
Yes. Ben is the CEO. Are you the CEO? Well, I suppose, yeah.
I'm the chairman.
The chairman.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good being. I've been a chairman of several things. You don't really do anything, do you, except shout at people. It's good fun. Chairman of the Bow Group. I'm a toxopholist, you see. So I thought when I said, "Oh, good, we got."
He thought it was to do with archery.
I did, but
That's
it's
why
not.
I got you in. Yeah.
No.
What is it to do with?
It's to do with conservatism and politics.
Yeah, sadly there is none. As a fan of Margaret Thatcher's, I think the Conservatives have just lost their way, haven't they?
I agree.
You know, if Margaret Thatcher was around, we would not be in this situation today.
Absolutely no chance.
You know,
She's gone, James. You're going to have to, accept it.
No, well,
Yeah.
I mean, she didn't go that long ago, and I can tell you that she really was not a fan of the state of things when she left.
Well, no, she wasn't. I had a night out with Margaret in Stringfellows Club some years ago, and she told me things there that I couldn't possibly repeat.
Yeah.
About some of the
What did she
Schindler's wonders.
Like
in
what?
the
I mean, you can
Conservative
say now because you're not.
Well, no, I don't want to.
Come on, tell us.
No, I'm not going to.
Say it.
I'm leaving it for my memoir so I can make £1 million like David Cameron.
Yeah.
I mean, who'd be stupid enough to buy his book? I don't know. Anyway, just before we bring in our other guest, just tell me briefly, Ben, what the Bow Group is set to do at the moment as far as Brexit is concerned.
Well, as an organisation, we campaigned for and supported Brexit. So we're in the process of advocating that Brexit is delivered.
Which Brexit is delivered, by the way?
The Brexit that was on the ballot paper.
And what was the Brexit on the ballot paper?
That was leaving the single market, leaving the customs union, and of course leaving the European Union as a whole. And doing so in a timely fashion. And of course, the Article 50 process, when it was triggered, should have been a 2-year process that should have come to an end on March 29th of last week and didn't.
Yeah. The thing that all of you fail to understand is that there are an enormous amount of people in this country, including Conservatives, who don't want Brexit. And it's okay for you guys to say, oh, yes, but it's the will of the people and there's been more people voting, all that baloney. But, in a general election, which is where democracy works in this country, you get to change your mind every 5 years. In a true democracy, we would be able to change our mind. And so the only way forward for this, and I don't care which way it goes, although if we leave the European Union, we'll pay for it. But if you want democracy, then we have to have another vote. It has to... No, keep your eyes on me. It has to be another vote.
Well, I don't necessarily disagree with the basis of what you're saying.
Good.
Which is
I knew you were a good bloke because
that
you'd like Margaret.
That democracy never ends. There's no final statement of democracy. But where I disagreed with you before on this issue is that what needs to happen for the process that you want to happen to take place is that a political party needs to stand with that in their manifesto, and they need to be elected to government.
The problem we have is that the opposition, led by, I hate to mention the name on my radio programme, but led by Jeremy Corbyn, who refuses to come on Talk Radio for some reason.
Yeah, well, a lot of things.
And I've thrown the invitation
He
out
hardly
there.
goes on anything, does he? You know what I mean?
I used to work on another radio station. He was never off there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
When he had no power.
Yeah. Anyway, that's by the by. So what you want to see is an election and one side standing for Remain. So we can work it out.
I don't necessarily want to see that. I'm simply saying that for a second vote to take place, that is what should happen. And it doesn't necessarily have to happen in the next 5 years. It doesn't necessarily have to happen in the next 10 years.
Well, we had that after the referendum with the Lib Dems, and they totally got...
Well, exactly, but that's democracy. So 85% of people voted for parties that pledged to deliver Brexit in the 2017 general election. So that's democracy. But I think where I agree with James is that in the future, if the nation changed its mind and wanted to elect a political party...
every 20 years maybe. But a referendum is actually more democratic than a general election.
In
it's
many
pure
ways,
democracy.
In many ways it is, but the democratic process we have is the one we have to play by the rules of as things stand. And I think it does need to change.
Can I actually ask a favour? Can we do away with referendum for good? Because they seem to do nothing but cause aggravation. And so,
But they've always been obeyed before, haven't they?
No, not really.
I think they
well, when we had the Scottish referendum, it was within days afterwards the SNP were already saying they wanted to have another referendum. I don't think referendums are entirely useless, but it wouldn't be entirely unfair either to make the argument that it wasn't somewhat of a pushing of duty away from government and Parliament to the people, and I think that's what David Cameron was trying to do. He didn't want to address the issue himself.
He was weak.
He couldn't get
weak
control
man.
of the Conservative
Well,
Party.
shouldn't that have been done for the Maastricht and the Lisbon Treaty anyway? Shouldn't they have been? And then we wouldn't have gotten this mess.
Well, as the treaty stands now, for further treaty change, there does have to be referendums, but that's an EU requirement, not a UK requirement.
Okay, let's bring in Eloise Todd, who is the CEO of Best for Britain, and let's see if we can't thrash this out, because obviously the politicians can't. Eloise, good evening to you.
Good evening.
Now, I have to be quite honest. As far as I'm concerned, we should never have had this referendum. It's ridiculous, and we have wasted billions on it so far. And if anybody tells me we're going to get 39 billion back from the EU, we're not really, because we'd have had to borrow it in the first place anyway. Where do we go from here? Oh, by the way, say hello to Ben Harris-Quinney, chairman of the Bow Group.
Hi, Ben. Nice to speak to you.
Have you met each other or not?
I don't believe so.
No, that's a shame. You should get together, have a cup of coffee, and just, shoot the breeze, shouldn't they, Ash?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that would be nice. Now, Best for Britain, what do you want?
We are an anti-Brexit organisation. We think that the UK would be better off fighting for its future within the EU. The UK is a really influential partner within the EU right now. And we also are fighting for a final say for the people, because I heard what Ben said about the ballot paper being really clear, but it actually just said, if you want to leave the European Union, tick here. So while he might have had a clear view of what that meant, that it meant leaving the single market and customs union, certainly a lot of other people thought that it meant something else. And so I think the democratic issue that we have at the moment for the whole country, no matter what your point of view, there's a hard Brexit, there's a no-deal Brexit, there's a soft Brexit, there's different variations of soft Brexit. Surely it's only fair for Parliament to land on one of those options and put it to the people, at least on those options, because actually it wasn't clear what kind of Brexit people were voting for, and the very existence of multiple Brexits.
Well, I don't think I'd ever heard of the customs union, actually, before we started talking about it after the referendum. And as I understand it now, Eloise, and Ben, tell me if this is wrong or not, the customs union is basically what the common market was, which is what a lot of people said they voted for and would like just to stay in a common market.
Apart from the free movement part, yes.
Not entirely. There were other things that we joined when we joined in the 70s. There was more to it than just the customs union, for sure. There were other policies that we joined. But I think, it would be more stable for our trade to be in the customs union. But the truth is that I also heard Ben mention about 84%, I think he said 85%, 84% of people voting for pro-Brexit parties in the last election. I mean, the thing about the Labour Party position was they made very clear some sort of conditions that they thought Brexit should get over, because otherwise they would have been giving a blank cheque to the Tory government, which they didn't do. And to be honest, we're in a right mess. We're days after we should have left. No one's got a clear path forward. We've got indicative votes going on right now, the votes being counted. So surely on anybody's measure, no matter where you stand in the debate, surely there's a case for putting this back to the people right now.
Well, to your point, Eloise, about what was on the ballot paper, the government spent £9 million, which is £9 million the Brexit campaign didn't have, to send a leaflet to every house in the UK to explain exactly what leaving the European Union would mean. And in that leaflet, it included the customs union and the single market. Look, there's always a problem in general elections, in referendums, in political issues generally, that the public may not be aware of all the information that surrounds it. But certainly that information was provided. And David Cameron, who was a supporter of Remain, made it very clear that a vote for Brexit would mean leaving the customs union and leaving the single market.
Well, I'm afraid that the
I
leaders
don't think
of the
ignorance
Leave
is a
campaign
defence,
were
really.
propagating. Well, the leaders of the Leave campaign, which were the ones actually talking on the doorstep and on the TV about what to expect, were saying something entirely different. So I don't think we can claim that it was very clear to everybody what kind of Brexit they were voting for. I mean, if it was clear, surely Parliament would have had an easier job.
Well, I don't know what
result.
you're referring to in terms of what people on the doorstep have said, but what we do know is the government sent out a leaflet. The British government sent out a leaflet that taxpayers paid for that made it clear the terms that the referendum was being held under, and the terms of Brexit were that we leave the single market and customs union. I mean, do you dispute that?
They seem to have very little to do with where we are today, though. I mean, Theresa May set her red lines, and they've been roundly rejected 3 times now by Parliament.
Well, look, if what you're saying is that this government is a shambles and Parliament is at odds with each other, I certainly wouldn't deny that. But if you're questioning what people were voting for when they voted Brexit, the government did make it clear, and this was a Remain supporting Prime Minister and a Remain supporting Chancellor, that set out very clearly that a Brexit
the leaders of the Leave campaign, that were very many and very different, were offering different things that people wanted to hear. And we've got factions in Parliament now that want different kinds of Brexit.
Right.
So
well,
we are at a parliamentary impasse, right?
So what do we hang on?
To have
Eloise,
a really good way forward. So let's get it back to the people.
Eloise, I'm looking in the Times today where Labour have been going on about their concerns on migration boost hopes for customs union. And a lot of people in business, Ben, as well, are concerned about not being able to get the workforce they want that come in, particularly sort of temporarily to do some of the jobs in agriculture in the summer. And a lot of farms, particularly where I live in Kent, are very worried about this.
Yeah, but it's also true that there are a great many people in this country that have been very worried about the level of migration into the UK over the last few decades. The point of Brexit is simply to say that we should be able to make that final decision. So if it is decided that the government wants to implement an immigration bill that allows more agricultural workers to come in or allows more nurses to come in, then they can do that.
It's a pretty annoying thing, isn't it? That quite a lot of people voted to leave the European Union, and people voted for various reasons to leave. But a lot of people voted because for some reason they don't like foreigners. And I find that really worrying. We live in a very small planet, and it gets smaller every day as
I don't think it's that they don't like foreigners. I think my position on immigration is that I'm pro-immigration but anti-mass immigration, because what mass immigration does is it changes things, it changes communities very, very quickly in a way that is unsustainable. You've been talking about knife crime.
What we need to do, right, is this. This is my view, and if I have to come as a benevolent dictator to sort it out, I'm happy to do so. But, if people want to come to this country, they want to come here because they want to be British or they want to live like we do. And so we should stop, actually, bending over backwards to facilitate everybody to continue living like they used to live in the country they came from. Dead simple. And then people can come, I don't care who comes, as long as they want to contribute to everything that's going on and pay their taxes and live in the same way we do.
Well, yeah, that's a great idea, but that's not the idea that's been in place over the last few decades.
No, well, sort it out, and then we will all be able to live a little more harmoniously.
Well, I'm neither a benevolent dictator, so I'm unable to deliver that. But you've got to acknowledge.
Well, I'd like Eloise to be a benevolent dictator and sort this out as well. So what would you do, Eloise?
On the migration point, there's a few really sensible measures that any government can take already, which our government has simply never taken up. So, for example, within the EU as a member, you can say that people can come over, they've got the right to come over, but they have to register when they come over, and if they haven't found a job within 3 months, they have to go back, and they also have to prove that they've got enough money to sustain them.
Why do you think we've never done that, Eloise? And also, if you're in France, and I was in France for quite some time, you go to hospital or go anywhere in France and expect them to have a leaflet in English, well, they won't. And they won't get you an interpreter either. You'll have to do that. And maybe we ought to stop making it as easy. Now, I think there are lots of things, as you said, Eloise, we could do that just haven't been done.
I honestly think that, in terms of the workforce that we have, a lot of it is actually needed. If we look at some of our hospitals reliant on up to 10% of the workforce in some hospitals that are EU migrants, these are key public sector workers. So we want to be a bit careful what we wish for, because we're already seeing them go home in droves because they don't feel welcome here. And I think that also the thing about migration is when you attract people to come over, they're already skilled. It's some of the most efficient way you can actually boost your economy because they are giving tax to our economy. And as I say, the thing that's constantly missed are the things that we can do already as a member of the EU. So I fear that if we get one of these Brexits through, whether it's a hard Brexit that will hit us economically or a soft Brexit that actually denudes us of power and actually loses the sovereignty that we currently have, I worry that the kind of measures we'll implement we could have done anyway as a member of the EU. So we just need to kind of take a pause, step back and look at all the improvements we could make, what we can do as a member of the EU, what we can do outside, and give all that information to the people because they didn't have that kind of information in 2016.
Ben, Eloise sounds very sensible to me. You sound reasonably sensible to me, and of course you share the same hairstyle as me, and I think that is a very, very good plus in your favour. Surely it cannot be above the bounds of possibility for our elected representatives to sort this out without all this aggravation. We are allowing some very loud and very lewd people to frighten our Parliament in not being able to act in the best interests of the majority in this country. And the majority of this country, I don't believe at this particular moment, want to go any particular way because they're confused, like me.
Well, I have to say that whilst I have many dear friends in Parliament, this is not the best Parliament this nation has ever seen. I think there are many reasons why the career of politics or the role of being a member of Parliament has been denuded, and I put down the reason. It's a bit of a nerdy point, but I put down the reason to the lack of democracy within parties themselves, in that you tend to get these conveyor belt candidates coming through, the sort of Oxbridge people that have all done
career
politicians, and the biggest problem about them is they're all the same. You know, there's not a variation of experience.
Have you got political ambitions, Ben?
Well, I'm very happy to be in the position I'm in, which is one that can comment on political issues and doesn't have to.
What about you, Eloise? Have you got political aspirations?
My only political ambition is to get a final say for this country and to have a process that actually ends up bringing us all together, that we can get behind the result and win the peace, as well as actually have that conversation during the campaign.
And if it continues the way it is and we have that vote, and then the vote is exactly the same as it was, but maybe the other way around, maybe it's 52% to those who want to stay. How will we then work it out?
I think that you have to probably have the same rules as last time, but you have to check in with people and say, we're going to have a prospectus that accompanies this vote, just like we did for the Scottish independence referendum, just like we did for the Good Friday Agreement. You know, you need to take a proposal and ask people to confirm it or not. And if not, we go back to what we're already in, which is the European Union.
But that's what happened. The government sent out, they spent £9 million sending out a prospectus to every household in Britain.
We had David Davis saying we'd have the exact same benefits of being in the EU. That's manifestly proven untrue by any government-owned source material you care to read.
But David Davis wasn't the person. David Davis at the time, wasn't in government.
Your best defence is what David Cameron and George Osborne said. I think we're in a different time of space now.
I have a low opinion of David Cameron and George Osborne, but one cannot deny that they were the Prime Minister and they were the Chancellor and the government.
They seem to be handy to you at the moment. Even the deal that the government then promised, which was a different whole government, we've then got a May deal, which God knows what's happening with that because it's coming back for a fourth vote. We've also got a customs union. We've got a soft Brexit.
Yes, but the point is the government made clear the terms at which the vote was being held under in what you would describe as a prospectus.
You think it should be May's deal, do you?
No, I don't. What we're discussing is whether the government made clear what Brexit meant, and they sent out a leaflet that set it out, that it meant leaving the customs union and single market.
There are at least 4 Brexits being discussed in Parliament right now.
Right, but I'm talking about what the government laid out in terms of what the vote would be.
Do you think it was obvious to you? So which of those versions of Brexit do you think was obviously on the ballot paper in 2016? Because I think the rest of the nation is not where you are.
Well, Theresa May's
the
does
leaflet
fill
one.
the criteria.
The leaflet.
Before we carry on, ladies and gentlemen, because I've got to take a break in a moment, I want to know, first of all from Ben, and then finally from you, Eloise. There was a record. Do you remember Paul and Barry Ryan with Eloise? Do you remember that?
I don't.
No, we're going to the break with that, Samba. That's something for you to... and the Damned did cover it, but I think Eloise would probably like the original. Oh,
you're aging me. Damned was 84.
You don't even remember it, do you? So it'll be nice for you to hear it. Ben, Parliament can't sort this out. There is not enough will in this country for us to have a straight Brexit. And I don't think it'd be good for us personally to leave without any deal. I think that would be terrible for business, would not forgive the Conservatives if they did that. So maybe a vote for the people, that's true democracy. That must be the way to go, surely.
No, I think if you want to go for the democratic option, then you're talking about a general election, where different parties stand.
Oh.
Some might stand saying we want a new vote, some might say we stay in the UU, some might say we've got to leave on a no deal, but you put it to the public in that way.
Would you like that, Eloise, or not?
I think it's difficult because of our first past the post system. I think that a question on the question of membership, given the 3-year turmoil we've had, is the best way forward for our country.
All right. Thank you all very much indeed. We aren't a lot further forward, but who knows, later in the week we may. Front page of the Times today, soft Brexit will shatter Tory party, May warns. I wonder if it will. And what is a soft Brexit? It has to go back to the people. Ben is still with us, who is the chairman of the Bow Group, who are... Do the Bow Group exist when there is no Brexit? You're not just purely there.
We've been around since 1951 as a Conservative think tank.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, you're older than you look. Okay. And stay on the microphone. Thank you very much. Christine Jardine is the Liberal Democrat MP for Edinburgh West, and we spoke on Saturday when I was being Jeremy Kyle. And I said we'd talk again today, but we don't unfortunately know what's happening, really. You've been in the House. Have you got any idea of how it's going or not?
Well, I think it could have gone better. And unfortunately, at the last moment, Nick Bowles, when he proposed his proposition,
What did Nick Bowles say?
Common Market 2.0, which is single market, customs union, emergency brake on immigration with an exemption for Scotland. And there was a lot of support for it, but at the last minute he said that it had to go through on May the 22nd. There'd be no extension, no people's vote, and I think that lost him a lot of support there and then. So I don't know if it'll get through. I was extremely disappointed. I wanted a composite motion that put together the two most popular from last week's votes, and, you know, with a realistic chance then that we would get a solution. Now, I don't know. I simply don't know. People just failed to compromise, failed to see the benefit of coming up with something that would appeal across the House. So that's where we are.
Well, I've got Ben Harris-Quinney, who's chairman of the Bow Group. It's a right-wing think tank, conservative think tank, who's here. Obviously very keen Brexiteer. I think I would... and he wants to see a general election to sort it out. The problem is, as far as I can see, Christine, there is no party that stands to stay in the European Parliament, so we couldn't have a general election to sort it out, could we?
Well, a general election couldn't sort it out because you might end up with all the same people or most of the same people back and be no further forward and just have taken time. And, you know, the public want it fixed. They don't want another general election. And also, what platform would the Conservative Party stand on? Are they for, you know, no deal? You know, what exactly would they say? And similarly, I suppose you could make the same argument about the Labour Party. But, you know... We've been down this route once before where Theresa May thought a general election would settle it, and it didn't work. So I think it would be a mistake to go down that route again. Ben?
Well, I think it's exactly the point that you make, that if there was a general election, the parties would have to decide what their positions were. It may shake them into action. I think the Conservative Party would very quickly undergo the process of getting a new leader. And my feeling is that Labour would probably go with either remaining in the EU or having a people's vote. And look, I would campaign against it, But if they won the election, then I certainly wouldn't argue with it and try and get the result overturned.
Well, I mean, people don't try and get the results of elections overturned, and we're not trying to have the result. Nobody's trying to have the result of the referendum overturned. What we have been saying for 2.5 years now is that people need to have the chance to decide whether the final deal is what they want or not. We're not saying just, have another referendum. Give them a chance to decide on the final deal. And, that would be our position in any election. But I think the problem that both the Conservatives and the Labour Party have is that the public is a bit fed up and confused about where they actually stand. Now, that's for them to decide, not me. But I would rather just see us get on and fix this and find a way forward than go to all put people through all the hassle, expense, delay, etc. of another general election, which at the end of the day may not solve it. It didn't before.
Well, I think actually the problems go far wider than Brexit. We clearly have a parliament and a government that is unable to lead the country forward, not just on Brexit, but on a range of issues.
Well, we're not talking about anything else at the moment. I can't remember the last time we actually spoke about
but my point is, I think what elections do, if you look at the opinion polls, the public might be uncertain on the direction forward regarding Brexit. What they seem to be universally certain on is that this government is making a real hash of things, and that Parliament is not putting the best image towards the public.
Then the only way forward,
an election would force MPs to clarify their positions, to stand before the public.
Well, what would be wrong with having a special vote on this issue for the public to decide,
because
and giving them
I think the problem
a
with
number of options?
And actually, I think it's a bad idea even from a Remain point of view, because what will be said about it for all time is that, well, the public voted for Brexit and it was overturned, not by a democratic process.
No.
But because
Christine,
it's happened before. It happened in Ireland.
All right. Let Christine answer so far. Go on.
That's exactly the opposite from what would happen. What a confirmatory referendum would do is that it would give both sides the chance to have a final say, and then we'd put it to bed, and that would be an end of it. Nothing would be overturned. A confirmatory referendum is legally binding. It happened in Northern Ireland after the Good Friday Agreement, and it was a huge success. And it could happen again with regard to the European Union, and it would put it to bed, and both sides would be able then to say that they'd had a fair crack of the whip and get on with implementing whatever people decided.
But to be clear, would Remain be on the ballot, or are you just talking about different forms of Brexit that would be on the ballot?
I think you have to give people now the choice of Remain, because we're 3 years down the line and circumstances have changed, and you can't say to them, well, you can only have the choices of Brexit. You have
so
to
you're saying you're not overturning the
Remain.
result of Brexit, but Brexit's never happened. People talk about
never
Brexit chaos. We haven't actually had Brexit, have we? We haven't left the European Union.
We never voted on the deal. We voted on a general principle, but not on an actual deal.
Right, but we voted on the basis of leaving the single market.
Hang on, I've got to go to the news. I don't understand. Okay. Why is not having a vote on this and what is proposed in Parliament no good to you, but a general election is, Ben? I mean, if it's going to solve the impasse which we are at the moment, then why don't we
because democratic process is an important
but democracy means you can change your mind.
Well, it does. It absolutely does. And the way we got to this referendum today, in 2016, was that the Conservative Party put it in their manifesto and were elected to government. So what I'm simply saying is, if you want a second referendum, have a political party stand on that basis, which the Liberal Democrats did in 2016. Did do very well.
Yeah, but this isn't a second referendum. This is a
confirmation referendum.
Whatever you want to call it. I think a lot of people would see it as a second referendum.
No, well, not if you explain it properly. Of course they won't. A confirmation referendum, as Christine said, is legally binding. The referendum we had before isn't legally binding.
It's a Remainers referendum. We all know that.
Could you shut up? Order! Thank you. Somebody asked me, it was Tony, he said, next time Ash steps out of line, can you shout order? Order! Yeah, I could do that. I could be the speaker. Okay, listen, Christine, we'll talk again, I'm sure, because I don't think we've got very far with this at the moment. Ben, thank you very much indeed from coming in from the Bow Group. I'm sure we'll have you in again and talk about this. Yeah. At 10 tonight, in an hour's time, of course, we will begin to get the solution. The solution may say nothing. In fact, I probably think it is, but I'll be here until around about 10:15, 10:20 tonight with Ross Kempsell, our political editor, just going through what the vote tells us. For the moment, guys, thank you very much indeed.